And we are
My
now
name,
recording.
yeah,
Okay, Steve, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
sure. My name's Steve Williams. Until recently, I was Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at SAP. I'm now Principal at Constructive Public Engagement and focus my work on strategic use of technology for community economic development, nonprofit empowerment, and working with corporations in their corporate social responsibility teams.
Okay, so maybe you could talk a wee bit about how you see the use of information technology as a tool at for enterprise development or for social enterprise development.
Right. Well, I mean, it's very interesting. The whole use of information and management at that social enterprise level is useful for a couple of different reasons. One is really around helping the organization itself become more efficient and be able to see what your targets are, how you're doing according to target, and really, are you doing what you're trying to achieve? But the other part is that's really equally important is how are you communicating the impact and the results of that? One of the challenges that a lot of social enterprises have, a lot of community economic development initiatives have, is that it's not purely the financial motive. Is that of course you're looking at the revenue, you're looking at being profitable, but you're also looking at employing people with barriers to employment, having a positive environmental impact, looking at the community multiplier effect of the money that's coming in, looking at building community cohesion, things that are typically not reported in your balance sheet. So with information and being able to track what some of those different metrics are and think about how are you going to communicate and how are you going to measure your organization and also demonstrate the impact you're making, information technology on both those lenses are critically important.
Could you give some examples of sort of enterprise that you've worked with or helped to fund or that sort of thing?
Sure. So a great example is the Potluck Cafe and Catering Society here in Vancouver, and they are a nonprofit, but they also operate a small cafe on East Hastings and run a corporate catering company where they do breakfast and lunches and cater meetings and so on. And they're doing about $1 million a year in business. And but their mission is really not only to run that catering company, but also to provide employment for people with barriers in the downtown east side, as well as building up job skills and capacity, and really ensuring that there's long-term employment, not just doing job training. And they also provide free meals, over 25,000 free meals a year to residents of the Portland Hotel Society that are severely disadvantaged in the inner city. So the challenge that they had is that they're running this big organization, but they're having a really hard time both understanding really what kind of progress they were making and how they were communicating the impact of that to the broader community. So we partnered with them as well as with the Van City Community Foundation with a project called Demonstrating Value that you can look at demonstratingvalue.org and really sort of help them walk through looking at their financial metrics, so how they're performing as a business, and also their community impact metrics, so what they're trying to do in the community, as well as their own organizational sustainability. So really focusing on how are they developing their staff, how much are they paying their staff, how are they developing their board, and so on. And went through a process to look at capturing different metrics in those pieces. And from that, they've actually developed an interactive dashboard using the SAP Crystal Dashboard technology that they can now use at a board level and look at their finances, look at revenue trends, growth, profitability, everything you'd normally look at as a business, but also from a social side, look at how many people are they employing from the inner city, how many full-time positions, how many apprenticeships, what kind of job skills, what kind of life skills support are they providing, and also identify the costs of what that employment support really means and look at their funding and fundraising. So they found it to be a very valuable tool, not only for their board of directors, who now has a better insight in the strategic use of the technology and running their business, but also for their senior management and their staff to understand really what direction the organization is going.
Was there anything specific about the who did this technology implementation, the design or the implementation of the technology that would be specific to that kind of an organization as opposed to any other kind of an organization? Who actually did the
Well,
implementation?
so the implementation was in two phases. So the first phase was about 4 years ago, where I, as a volunteer, helped put together the initial dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year, they had a volunteer that effectively completely rebuilt the dashboard and built everything from scratch. And to integrate some more detailed data that they collected over the past 3 years. And that volunteer had a business background, had some technical background, but basically downloaded a free copy of the Crystal Dashboard software, and just by doing the online training and some YouTube videos was able to put that in place and put it together. Because one of the things that we've really found is that while the technology itself is important, it's also critically important to spend the time up front on looking at what are these metrics, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve, how are these going to be organized, how are we collecting the data, is this data coming in from QuickBooks, is it coming in from SurveyMonkey, is it coming from Excel spreadsheets, is it coming from paper documents that need to be transcribed. Doing that work is actually much harder than doing the actual end display of the data. So they really did it in kind of a couple phases that way, and now they're able to continue to maintain it, and they get that data from QuickBooks, from SurveyMonkey, and also from a custom sort of catering management software that does their scheduling and dispatch and so on, and they pull all that data together into their dashboard.
So a lot of the work then was in training the staff of the not-for-profit in how to do this, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, partly to train them, but also to really almost learn from the staff in a way around really what's important and what do we need to measure. And then looking at some of the existing, because the thing is, for any organization, you're already measuring some things. So, for example, they already had an accountant that was part-time. So now that accountant is still doing the same work that he did, but now has an additional use for those numbers that they can use for this board of directors report. In the same way that their employment support counselors were already doing that work, they were already tracking the conversations they were having, the number of people they were talking to, but now it's taking that data and integrating it. And I think that's one thing that you'll find for a lot of nonprofits and a lot of small businesses is that a lot of times it's not a shortage of information, it's that there's actually too many different sources of information. You've got one system that's tracking your finances, something else that you do your payroll in, you've got a couple of Excel spreadsheets, you track your inventory somewhere else, maybe you're using something like Salesforce.com or Google to actually promote your business. So the challenge is actually pulling those pieces together.
And have you done anything in rural areas?
In rural areas?
Yeah,
we've done a few. We worked with Raven Recycling up in Whitehorse, and then also the Hatem Interpretive Center, which is out in, I believe, in Mission. And there's also been a couple of First Nations whose names I can't remember right at the moment that are sort of taking on some of the other kind of things. Those are some BC examples. But other organizations around the world, we work with organizations in Haiti, in Ghana, in South Africa, all over the place that have used similar kind of techniques to measure their performance.
Would they have the same issues would there be different issues in, say, in a rural and remote location or in a less developed country location?
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of the same fundamental issues. When you're looking at rural versus least developed, I mean, if you're in, the biggest issue there is around connectivity, is around sort of how much and how easily can you get online. With a lot of the tools that we were using, you don't actually need to be online, so you can sort of do a lot of that offline, which helps. There's also some good mobile solutions, because even if you don't have high speed, you may have 3G or at least some kind of mobile phone access. But realistically, it's very much of the same issues around looking at managing that kind of technology and managing that information.
And how would you see scaling this? I mean, scaling this kind of an approach, the kind of support that you were providing to these organizations. Is it possible to scale that, or do you have to do it one by one?
Well, I think it is possible to scale, and there's a couple of different angles there. Is that while to a certain extent every business is unique and every nonprofit is unique and every community is unique, at the same time there are very much commonalities between those. So all businesses have revenue and costs. All nonprofits have clients and they're trying to make an impact in the community. All communities want to look at their social impact and their environmental and their economic development. So one of the biggest ways to scale that, and this is something we're talking with the Van City Community Foundation about now, is could we build tools and templates so that people can get started? So if you're running a social enterprise that's focused on the environment, here's something you can get started with. And we actually did a pilot project with that last year with 8 nonprofits across North America to do a very, very simple dashboard, but at least something that's 80% of the way there, and you can kind of get started. The other, I think, way to scale is really working more with funders and people who are actually looking to start this and develop these pieces, is that when you look at something like a Vancouver Foundation or a McConnell Foundation or a Ford Foundation, they're obviously working and supporting dozens, if not hundreds of organizations. And all of those organizations are doing impact reporting, and they're all doing it manually, and they're all keeping track of these things. So another way to scale would be, could we actually centralize some of that information and allow people to not have to reinvent the wheel every time with reporting, but actually do that in a way that saves them time. But ideally, one of the key things there is that when we're looking at using information strategically for an enterprise or for a nonprofit, a lot of reporting that gets done right now is really very beneficial to funders and to governments and to regulators, and completely irrelevant and useless to the actual organization on the ground. So the key is really, as the organization itself, are you using information for your own purposes? Can you really make sense of these things and really make it work for yourself?
That's great. Thanks, Steve. I've been talking to Steve Williams and on the technology in support of social enterprise. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to shut this off.